Welcome to the Yahowah vlog. I am your host, Craig Wynn, and this handsome fellow over here, he is the co-host. This is the indomitable Wookiee. We're here to continue our story on the last word picture. We're reviewing what is said in the 89th Mizmor. And to set the scene for what is transpiring here, this is really the fulcrum of human existence. I would go so far as to say that about the circumstances surrounding this song. You see, all the way from the beginning, all the way back to the garden 6,000 years ago, Yahweh's firstborn. Someone he just called the man, the first individual that Yahweh conceived in his image, giving him both a nephesh, which is consciousness, which all animals have, and uniquely a neshama, a conscience, the ability to intelligently relate to him. We started an episode that was quite the experiment between God and man. He wondered, was it possible for a life form to be able to relate to him in a way that was productive, that was enjoyable, that was useful, that was incremental and beneficial to his existence and to ours. And so God created a microcosm of the earth in Eden, a place that was particularly conducive and uniquely beneficial to sustain life. And he placed his firstborn, this man called the man, Ha-Adam, in that place. And they began an interesting relationship, just that it didn't materialize as God had hoped. Now, I'm sure you haven't heard that unless you've listened to these programs, that Adam was a bit of a flop. And it's because the man didn't have the energy, the sense of curiosity, of observation, of thoughtfulness, certainly of responsiveness, and of reliability to earn God's trust, such that this experiment in the enclosed confines of Eden could be allowed to grow beyond that, such that this one creature could be given incremental dimensions, be enveloped not in a limiting physical body, but enclosed his soul in light, such that he could go off and explore the universe with Yahweh, travel through the dimensions and time. That for that to happen, he was going to have to find a life form that was observant, responsive, thoughtful, one that was absolutely willing and enthusiastic about engaging with him, and then someone he could trust. And the first man, his firstborn, didn't measure up. And what God realized is that he would never have measured up to his potential, if that potential existed at all, inside the protective confines of Eden. No. Man would have to gain experience on his own apart from God. He would have to observe his environment, shape it to his survival, engage in the process of life, make mistakes, learn from them, fall, and get back up. All showing that in a world full of obstacles, challenges, that he could pass muster, that he could show himself worthy of being allowed off of this wonderful planet that is so conducive to life, such that he could explore the universe with its creator. And that is the story that we're examining, because it's Yahowah who caused the fall of man to give us this opportunity. And we've had this opportunity now for, well, just shy of 6,000 years. That's a very long time. And in all of that time, there are very few people that have gained Yahowah's attention such that he says, yeah, that one has potential. That one, I think I can work with. This one appears thoughtful and reliable, certainly willing to engage, and redeployable because they're dependable. And that story progresses through individuals like properly identifying who Adam really was. And I think he was Dowd, God's firstborn. And how he developed a relationship with one of the more interesting men in God's story, one that you only know about if you think about what caused him to learn about Yahowah and earn God's trust. And that would be Chanukh, who is the one who is learned, one who is properly trained and equipped and then deployed. How was it that Chanukh could come to have known about Yahowah? At the time, there was no Towrah. At the time, there was only one person on the planet, and the planet at this point, same size as it is now, but Nesoma man, those capable of engaging in a conversation with the God, as Chanukh obviously did, they were very few individuals. And the most prominent of them would be the man who had come out of Eden, now just known as the man, Adam, and conceived right around 600 years into Adam's 930-year life. The last third of his life, Chanukh would have had the opportunity to get to know Yahowah through the stories that Adam recalled of him. And then, obviously despondent based upon the quality of his life then versus now, I'm sure that Yahowah appreciated Chanukh supporting his firstborn, which is how he earned Yahowah's trust. There is no other meaningful way, rational way that this can be accomplished. It's why I began to look at all things from the perspective of, who are these people? What are their similarities? How are certain souls redeployed through God's story? Because it happens to be the only way that God can affect his people such that the pace of his plan stays on track. There's no other way. And it's the ideal way. It's exceedingly ingenious and also extraordinarily easy for God. In fact, it's easier for God than any other method. Finds people he likes working with, that he can trust. And when it's important, when it's really important, he deploys them. And of course, there were important moments before the fall of King Dowd, who fell more precipitously by far than did Adam before him. The fall of King Dowd is the most egregious story that appears anywhere among the writings, prophets, Psalms, and Towrah. There's the only thing that even could be compared to it is the constant embittered antagonism that the malcontents that became the children of Yisra'el showed to Yahowah during the Exodus. But the difference is they never endeared themselves to him and just stayed embittered all the while Dowd did early in his life endear himself to Yahowah. But his fall was every bit to the extent of the children of Yisra'el during the Exodus. He was belligerent towards God. And it became so bad that just as had happened with the children of Israel during the Exodus, God stopped talking to his people. He would talk through Moshe, but never directly to them again. Still hasn't talked directly to them. And God stopped talking to Dowd. Anything he had to say, he said through an intermediary. And what he had to say was harsh. And so God was put in quite a predicament, because if this wasn't resolved, the entire human experience, gone. Nothing left of it. The planet devolves into chaos. Everyone dies. None of the Mow'edym are fulfilled. There's no upcoming Shabuah harvest, no Towrah gleaning, no sacrifice of the Adam of Perah, no remnant of Yisra'el, no return of our Messiah or God, and no restoration to the conditions of the garden during Sukkah. None of that. I'm not here talking to you. You know nothing about the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Verbatim, because they would not have been fulfilled. The covenant's benefits could not be achieved. It all comes down to this. If the relationship between Dowd and Yahowah, which was fractured beyond even divine repair, God couldn't resolve it. I mean, God himself could not resolve it. He had no interest in resolving it. I mean, he had an interest in resolving it, but he, not himself. He absolutely, unequivocally was not talking to Dowd, and his message to Dowd is, I'm going to paint the nastiest picture of a person I can possibly conceive, and I'm going to tell you through Nathan that you are that man. The trust between them was gone. And so the only way to restore that was through intervention. And it becomes obvious along the way that God has fixtures. You know, the first time we're confronted with this reality, when literally the fate of humankind is on the line, where it's do or die, someone either steps up and takes responsibility and accepts Yahweh at his word, does what God says, listens to him and acts accordingly, or the entire human experience is for naught. You know what that moment was?
I only got part of the question. I'm watching the stream go down, and we're
the king of the cables is doing his normal, which is to monitor all of the streams that we have as a result of this program. So it's unfair when I turn to him, but it's unfair if I don't acknowledge him being here. If I were to have asked him that question when he was able to listen as opposed to managing this program and producing it, he would know that the turning point of the human experience was with Noach. And I'm here to tell you that if Noach was not redeployed, if Noach was not indeed the very man that Yahweh said, he is a man who walks after me. He is a man who has separated himself from all human contrivances, and someone I can trust, someone I want to be with me, someone I can, as his name says, redeploy. If he is not that man, there is no way possible that Noach could have known who Yahweh was, that Noach could have earned God's trust, such that Noach could be the person God would use to salvage the human experience. And that is because everyone around Eden, which is the area around the Black Sea, upper Mesopotamia, this general area, God referred to as Nephilim, the fallen. And he says that they were Hamas, vicious terrorists, overtly religious, And there was no hope for them. And God said, I grieve that I've even created man. And so Yahowah found this one man, or I should say he redeployed him. And his life is just so telling in this regard, that he is the one who served as the catalyst towards the worst period of the interference of the Nephilim, as they were the negative expression of Nesalmaman, man with a conscience. So that God could give him explicit instructions how to build the ark that would spare humans with the Nesalma, all of whom were in that region at that time. And he listened to God that he already knew, and he did what he normally does. He does what Yahowah wants him to do, and he built the ark, and he saved Nesalmaman. And he, his sons and wives, delivered the future offspring that would become Yisra'el. And we have affirmation that what they did was also emblematic of the covenant. So here we are again with a similar story. I don't think this is the next deployment of Chanoch. I'm convinced that he also represents Boaz, and that his wife represents Ruth. And they're, no fewer than 100 really interesting clues that bring that to bear, as they are the couple that Yahowah chose to bring forth the kinsman redeemer, something they would do the waning years of the third millennia, in advance of the fourth millennia, when Dowd would serve as the kinsman redeemer and fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and B'Kodem. So by this time, as they are now serving as surrogate parents to Dowd, filling the gap of really what turned out to be absentee parents for Dowd, such that Dowd became emblematic of Yisra'el, both good and bad, and at this time, mostly bad. He was given parents that Yahowah thought could model what the now adult man, he was probably 60 by this time, needed to experience, needed to hear, needed to know. And so we came into this story by analyzing the last word picture, which is the 31st mashal, or word picture, the proverb. And in it, it becomes obvious that there is a woman who is serving as Dowd's mother. And she is identified as an Amma. She is called the Ashar, the beneficial and blessed woman. She's called the greatest of all women. And her husband is called Baal, husband. And I know that there are people out there that have a conniption fit over that. That's just because they're conspiratorialists and are accustomed to staring at a dot on the wall and never are able to understand how the pieces of the puzzle all fit together. They don't know that Yahowah himself referred to himself as Baal, as husband of the covenant that he established with his people. It's a very positive term in that regard. They don't know that one of the earliest prophets that tried to restore the fate of Yisra'el was called Balaam, and the role that he played and the importance of it, and that he absolutely and unequivocally spoke for Yahowah. I miss the fact that the covenant is akin to a marriage. And in a marriage, there is a husband and wife, and the Hebrew word for husband is Baal. They don't understand that if Yahowah uses terms very favorably, and that they then are misappropriated by the adversary. Baal is one of them, becoming the Lord and Master of religion. But it doesn't change the fact that it also is very positive, particularly in the reestablishment of the covenant. The same thing is true with Asher. And Asher is the name of one of the 12 tribes. It is the name that Leah chose for her stepson, because she said, as a result of him, I'm going to be known as Asher, a blessed and beneficial woman. And God, in the 31st Mashal, wants the world to know that the woman who came to Dowd's aid as his surrogate mother is that very woman, bears that title. Her name also happens to be Leah, but be that as it may. The whole picture has to be understood together. You can't take a fragment over here and say, oh boy, I'm going to make a big deal out of that. That's the mentality of the stupidity of conspiracy and why God hates it. It's the essence of it. It's how it has always been developed. So these two were brought to Dowd. And their job was to sober Dowd up, which the Amma did, to resolve his issues of lethargy by explaining to him who he was and what his responsibilities were, to reestablishing his awareness that he was the very Son of God, his firstborn. And that as his firstborn, he had responsibilities, and those responsibilities would extend at least 2 lives beyond the one that he was currently wasting. But like, all arrogant, and Dowd at this point was arrogant men, particularly men that didn't have a good relationship with their mother, particularly men that didn't choose well among women and had way too many that he didn't respect. He didn't listen to his mother. He would later. He would reflect on everything she had to say, and it would transform his life. But at this point, it wasn't enough. And so the ultimate hammer, I'm going to get your attention right now. And in so doing, I'm going to also delineate everything that the world needs to know. Not just my son needs to know, the world needs to know about this man, was delivered when Ethan Ha'Ezraki co-authored the single greatest piece of literature ever written with Yahowah. It's known as the 89th Psalm. And we have just come upon an amazing statement in it, one which I have now come to understand as a catalyst for the entire human experience. And it's the story about the sun and the moon and what they represent. Not as celestial objects, but as what they represent. Source of brilliant light that makes life possible. And the one that reflects that light, even in the darkest hours. Because Yahweh's first prophecy, among his most important prophecies, is one that nary 1 in a million people, I'm not even sure that there are as many as 1 in a billion over time, that have come to recognize that it even was a prophecy, is the presentation of the greater and lesser luminaries, both of whom God said are great, who volunteer to fulfill serving as the very signs of the Mow'edym, Pisak Matzah Bakurim, Shabua Teruah Kapurim, and Sukkah. And these greater and lesser luminaries that are presented on the 4th day are then reflected throughout God's story. And particularly as that story is at its midpoint right here. God's going to reflect our attention, because this is God speaking, and he's going to direct our attention right back to those luminaries, which this time he's going to refer to as the sun and the moon, and in the beginning he referred to as the greater and lesser luminaries. I'll go right back to this. And then he's going to tell us through his prophets that 3,000 years after this, those are still his central caste. They are the ones who prevail in the end. I know we're going to get to what I think is among the most amazing prophecies ever written in Jeremiah 31, with the reaffirmation of the covenant. And God tells you how that's done. And it's with the greater and lesser luminaries, the sun and the moon, where God goes all in and said, if they don't perform as I have instructed, if they don't do what needs to be done to enable your participation in the covenant, then there is no hope for Israel. It's gone. And therefore, no hope for the planet. And right now, we're dealing with what happens to the planet apart from those who benefit from the greater and lesser luminary. And Isaiah 13, 2 chapters after the introduction of the Towrah and 1 before the introduction to the great adversary, Hillel ben Shakar from Babylon. Powerful statements of what's going to happen in our future. And so the greater luminary, now in this passage, God introduces greater and lesser luminaries. God introduces in this passage regarding his son and his son's greatest supporter, right in the midpoint of God's story, 3,000 years from the garden, 3,000 years back to the garden. And then he's going to bring all of this into fruition and bring our attention back to the role they play in the last days. So that's quite an introduction. I think I'm almost 30 minutes into our program, and I've just introduced where we are in our program, but that's the purpose of this program. You can read the Torah and prophets. I've published them. Now, this happens to be a translation and analysis that's in an unpublished book, not because I'm trying to hide it, but because I'm trying to finish it. And the more I learn, the more I need to write. And so, it's already past 800 pages, and I'm still contributing to it because I've even changed the title of it to it's now Mayor, Luminaries, because there's just so much to learn. And we have turned a point in who we are and what we're doing. And that the role that I have had for the past 24 years, now really a quarter of a century, has changed ever so slightly. Up to this point, my intent was to learn what I could from Yahowah about why he hates religion and what his requests are of us if we want to engage in the covenant relationship, and what he's offering us through it. Such that both Yehudim and Goyim, once exposed to these things, could choose to be part of that covenant family. And so I presented all of these books and every interview I did, all open to everyone who might be interested, in hopes that those who were and had an open mind and who were willing to invest the time to learn could become part of the covenant family. But a lot of time has passed since we began. And over this quarter of a century, we have come up against the final harvest. And we've come to learn that Yahowah isn't looking for a lot of people. He's actually far more interested in excluding heaven than he is in including more souls in it. Because we're right back to where we were in the garden. Most people don't pass muster. And God's only interested in those who are observant, who are thoughtful, who are responsive, and most of all, responsible, resilient, those who make mistakes and learn from them, those who fall and get back up. And there just isn't enough time left for someone to begin reading the library at yadayah.com. Every one of the books are free, but there's, 35 of them, 25,000 pages. And you need to understand what's in them if you're going to be an effective member of the covenant family, and if you're going to engage in such a way that Yahowah can determine that you're trustworthy. And not enough time for that anymore. So we're going to go into the Shabuah harvest with those who have already begun to demonstrate their worth. And we're going to exclude those who have not. And so the purpose of what we do now, and why I go into such detail on these things, and why we have elevated the level of our presentation so that it's going to be way over the head of the malcontents, of those who are excluded, is because our job now is to equip those who will be working with me and others during the time of Israel's troubles, and then teaching the remnant of Yisra'el during the millennial celebration of Sukkah, so that they can earn Yahweh's trust too. That's where we are. And so that requires a level of intensity, a level of instruction that requires not only the reading and the processing of what's in the books, but of listening to and benefiting from the teachings offered in these programs and the insights of them, so that they are better grounded to contribute, more mature. All right, so this says, his offspring, he's speaking of Dowd, and that which he sows, Zerah, his descendants and posterity, will exist and endure. Oh boy, it doesn't look very good right now, does it? Israel has made a catastrophic mistake in attacking Iran for the second time. Made a catastrophic mistake in responding to the provocation of October 7th by the total destruction of Gaza. They've turned the world against them. They've made a horrendous decision by partnering with Rahab, by Satan incarnate, Donald Trump. And if you were to just assess the likelihood of Israel's survival at this point, apart from what we're going to do to ensure that a remnant endures, you would say it's impossible. I mean, there isn't any expert witness that I am aware of that thinks that Israel can survive its current plight, one that is self-inflicted. And so this is the message that ultimately is going to prevail. So it says, his offspring and that which he sows will exist and endure forever, from the past and throughout the future. This only happens because of what we're doing. If it were not for Yahowah, if it were not for the work that we are doing on behalf of Yahowah and his beloved son Dowd, to restore Yahweh's name and reclaim Dowd's reputation, his place of honor, the endurance of Israel wouldn't be possible. This is the way that is being achieved. Yahowah is revealing a statement that was prophetic of this event and the ones that will follow over the next 7 years. Then it says, and his throne, this is Keshe. Keshe means his throne, his place of honor, his sovereign authority. Speaking of Dowd, and his fully reflective moon, even his capacity to conceal and cover. All of those are definitions of Keshe. Should be compared to the brilliance of the sun. conspicuously made known before me as my obvious collaborator and acknowledged counterpart in my presence. Mizmor Psalm 89:13. You process that? So the first part of it, I've talked to death. His offspring and that which he sows will exist and endure forever into the past and throughout the future. That means that even though Israel is being misled badly now, even though Israel has a fungus and parasite in the swarm of Haredi and is rendered useless to God in the Marxists on the other side, with 45% of the population being unsalvageable and counterproductive. And even with them lashing out at all manner of foe and fighting everybody, it seems like, in the region in partnership with the devil, literally with Satan, that says that they should all die and would all die. They're going to continue to exist, although it's going to be a finite remnant of them. But I'll tell you, between now and then, Israel, you need to know you're only 60 days from entering the time of trouble. And that time of trouble is going to be far worse than the experience in the Holocaust. So the majority of you are not going to make it. Now, then it says something that is, again, extraordinary. No matter which way or all ways you define Keshe. You know, the first would be that his throne will be as brilliant as the sun. The next would be his place of honor, and his sovereign authority will be as sunlight. The next would be that his full moon, that lesser luminary that is reflecting his light. Keshe means full moon. So the fully reflective moon will be as brilliant as the sun. As God says, there's a lesser and greater luminary, and the Katan actually means younger of the two, that they are, in the end, collaborators. They're like father and son, like their brothers. They are eternal partners, inseparable, one a reflection of the other. So even his fully reflective moon will be as brilliant as the sun, as well as his ability to conceal and cover. Conceal and cover have a pejorative, but they're not. You know, before I knew how Dowd went about removing our guilt on matzah and carrying it into Sheol, never to be seen again, which is to conceal it. I looked at the realization that where there is light, there is no darkness. Light literally replaces darkness. And so, you know, there is that symbolism as it would in respect to cover. The darkness is covered by the light. And also, while conceal, as I have just shared, is synonymous with matzah, covering is synonymous with Kippurim, which is the day that Dowd returns with Yahowah. Kippur means to cover. Kippurim it means to reconcile in the sense that all past grievances are covered over. And so all of these insights are germane. But how would you know them if you weren't fully enveloped in God's story? You have to come to the point where you recognize all of the characters, all of the metaphors, all of the symbols and their interrelationship, and can make the connections, chokmah, wisely to comprehend, so that you're in this position to reflect the intent of God's message. Because he's saying all of these things. And then he's saying that the Son will be conspicuously made known in God's presence, that he'll be neged, obvious, as a collaborator and a counterpart. Rather exceptional. But it doesn't end there. Remember, the first prophecy in the Torah wasn't just there'll be a Gadol Meor, a greater luminary. And he alone will serve as the symbol of the one who is devoted to the Mow'edym. That doesn't say that, does it? It says there will be a greater and lesser luminary, and that both luminaries are great, and that both will serve as examples for the Mow'edym, Pesach, Matzah, Bakodim, Shavuot, Towrah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, because they will volunteer to have fulfilled them. So, even though Keshe reflects moon, God wants to make certain that you understood that association. So he says, similar to, just like, compared to, in the manner of, Ka, Yaresh, the moon. He's also prepared and affirmed as this will be set in place and established from long ago. Yeah, like 3 billion years ago? Isn't that when the fourth day of the creative epoch begun? 4 billion years ago? Yeah, I'd say that's fairly long ago. And if I'm right about the soul that was the first man being the firstborn, and therefore Dowd's soul, and it being redeployed, his soul first appeared 6,000 years ago. And then mine that came to know Yahowah through him, and then came to earn God's trust by supporting him as Chinook, would have been 5,400 years ago. That would be a long time, right? That's how long these two have been at it together. Kind of like brothers that, have been at each other's side. Oh, now for a very, very, very long time. But it's when God uses a metaphor, it walks on all fours. So we are also father and son, just as we are brothers, just as we are the sun and the moon, just as we are the ram and the bull. It runs the gamut with God. These are the key characters in his story. So similar to the moon, he's also prepared and affirmed, as this will be put in place and established from long ago and forevermore. The relationship between the greater and lesser luminaries endures all the way to the end and past it. They continue in that relationship forevermore. And both the greater and lesser luminaries are Ed. They're both restoring witnesses. They both speak of the eternal testimony. They both exemplify what it is to restore, to witness, and to share God's testimony, as well as what it means to be immortal. And God says, those are my guys. I'm all in with those guys. They're enduring. Yeah, they've been deployed over a long period of time, many times. They're reliable. That's why I keep on deploying them. They're confident and they're credible. Well, they are to some. And they are to God. Aman. He's also, this restoring witness is the moon. He's also readily verifiable. He's trustworthy. He's dependable. And God says, in the sky among the otherwise insignificant specks of dust below. Aha. Shakak. 1 in a billion, so to speak. Huh? Pause now and contemplate what you have just read. Good idea. Okay, so in 44 minutes and 50 seconds, I have taken you right back to where our last program concluded. And I did so because I realized that if I didn't do so, that what I was going to share from this point on would not have resonated with you, and I would have been a really lousy teacher. So here we go. Ethan, who is the perpetually reoccurring and continuously deployed, Resonate? Ring a bell with you? Ha is rocky, one coming forth as a tree to narrate these events. Now Yada will have completed his recent stint as one of the two Ed restoring witnesses during the conclusion of the time of trouble. His Ed testimony will endure and remain reliable as he is forever confident and credible. Now, this is one of the many times that the sun and the moon are joined together in this way, and there are many of them. That's how I'm rewriting the final volume of Coming Home, Mayor Luminaries, is because they are really woven into God's story. And you can't just go to the passage that says, oh, well, there they are, because then you'll miss the entire setup for how God intends to use them. So here God is saying that the moon, representing an individual like the sun, will be prepared to affirm and reestablish his credibility and Dowd's responsibility. Make no mistake, it was Dowd's seat of honor, Dowd's responsibility, Dowd's authorization, Dowd's very existence that is going to return as brilliant as the sun and God's presence. So this brilliance of the sun is being equated directly to a man. The greater luminary is a man. The man is Dowd. And therefore, the moon, who is now being equated to the man, is the one who most adroitly, most continuously reflects the king's credibility, reestablishes it, reflects his brilliance. He's Yada. There's no other candidate for it. It's obvious. If your eyes are open, if your mind is open, unless you're just a malcontent, and then nothing that God says will matter to you. So the moon is also an individual. And he's prepared to affirm and establish his credibility and Dowd's responsibility. He will continue to reflect the sun's life. And at this point, he is reestablishing it. That's the whole point of the 89th Mizmor. The sun had been eclipsed. So just as the Earth's satellite mirrors the sun's brilliance when our star is otherwise unseen at night, that is what's happening here. Dowd went dark amongst his people, amongst the world, as they stole everything that was important to his brilliance. And now it is the lesser luminary, the moon, that has restored all of that, so it can be seen again for all that it means to humankind. And that's why this individual being associated with Dowd, albeit less luminous, is called an enduring and reliable, even loyal witness. Now, as I have shared, and now we're going to reestablish the relationship being established between Dowd and Yada, the sun and the moon, the greater and lesser luminaries, is absolutely essential to understanding the 89th Mizmor and how they are collaborating at this moment, but also the creation account. Indeed, even the story of the Garden of Eden, and particularly as it relates to the covenant presentation and the Mow'edym pronouncements and fulfillments. We serve Yahweh's interests and those of his people. We deliver what God wants accomplished, when he wants it done, and when, where, and how. We have been unified in the past and are inseparable throughout the future. So please, I would recommend doing as Yahweh was asked. Pause now and reflect on what God has said about his son, the sun, and his witness, the moon. So now turning to the first prophecy. God said, with impending implications, there will be luminaries as sources of light. Luminaries as sources of light. To ponder the implications of, or illumination. In the expanse of the heavens. To understand the separation between the time of light, as it is distinct from, the darkness of the night. They will exist as symbols and signs, even as illustrious examples. And for the Mow'edym, appointed meeting times for the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony, as well as for the days and for the years. Can you say, for the timeline to develop? Therefore, they will exist for the enlightenment, or they will exist for enlightenment as luminaries, Maorth, to firmly extend the presence of the spiritual realm, to be an ore, a light, to provide illumination and enlightenment upon and over Ha'eretz, the earth. And therefore, it will continue to exist like this thereafter, based upon what preceded it. That is Bereshith 1:15 and 1:14. God, he acted and he engaged to appoint for this particular task what pertains to these two Maoreth, these two sources of illumination and enlightenment, who are Gedolim, who are both substantial and empowering. They're both important and influential, with Hagadol, the greater and most distinguished, as well as the older, of the Ha-Maor, the luminary, Mishshala, prominent and powerful, having dominion and authority as the one governing as sovereign of the illuminated time. And the Hakatan, the lesser, younger, and more recent Ha-Maor, luminary, Mishshala, prominent and powerful, having dominion and authority, the one authorized to lead through illustrative insights through the time of darkness, when the light is not known among the heavenly powers. The Almighty, he offered them as a gift, placing them in this position for this purpose, in the vast expanse and extensive and solid evidence of the spiritual realm, to provide light and enlightenment upon the land and upon the earth. 16 and 17 of the first chapter of Bereshith concludes in the 18th verse. And to govern, showing leadership by offering proverbial, illustrative, and memorable pictures comprised of words during the light of the day and through the darkness of night, providing a contrast to set apart or expel by severing association, through understanding and discernment, and by making intelligent connections leading to comprehending the light and comprehending the interval of time, such that you understand even in the darkness. God, he saw that this indeed was good. It was beneficial and productive. Stamp of approval on those two. Bereshith in the beginning, Genesis 1:18. Now, it is profoundly important relative to understanding prophecy that we correctly process the implications of what God intends to accomplish through these two luminaries. And at this point, it should be sufficiently clear that the brighter of the two is Dowd, with Yada shown reflecting the king's light as he fulfills the Mow'edym. And to think, all of this was foreseen just as life was emerging on our planet and then shared with us. Well, there's yet another enlightening connection between these men and the symbols representing them. And this one is presented in the 104th Mizmor. It reads, "The most highly exalted mountains are to approach that which prevails and is beneficial as an elevated rocky crag and is a trusted shelter to seek protection with the treasured scribe. The moon will act and engage, for Yada knows and acknowledges the sun's arrival as the eternal witness to the restoring appointments. Mizmor 104:19. Also, these metaphors portray the proper perspective to view the relationship between these individuals. By describing Dowd as the most important luminary on earth, Yahowah is conveying that the king's lives are important markers in time. Even the dates pursuant to when Dowd and Yada will fulfill the 7 Mow'edym, they're all predicted and predicated upon how we view these luminaries. For example, it was in the fullness of the moon's light that Dowd fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim. And it will be under the light of a full moon that we will camp out with our king during Sukkah, even as the sun is eclipsed, as the moon fulfills Towrah. Pretty amazing, isn't it? So we have reached the turning point in Dowd's song. And by the way, we're going to return to many, many more instances of the sun and the moon and how their interplay in this story work through God's timeline. But for now, we're still finishing and focusing upon the 89th Mizmor as the turning point in Dowd's life when his relationship with Yahowah was restored so that he could live up to the brilliance that God had in store for him. So while Yahowah continues to be the one delivering the message, and while his focus is still on his son, Dowd, as the brightest light in proximity to earth, God's concern now is over those who would deny and degrade all that Dowd represents and has achieved, particularly among his people. The attack now is against the religions of Judaism and of Christianity, because they've done more to debilitate what Dowd has accomplished than any others. So this condition remains pervasive with Jews, but it is also rampant among Gentiles. And it becomes even more aggravating when we realize that many of the promises made to Dowd were also made to his people, from being the children of God and the heirs to the covenant to being recipients of the land. His joys and heartaches, his ongoing battles, his insights, as well as his confusion, the benefits he enjoyed in concert with the covenant, and the consequences he endured when running afoul of it, are all shared between the Messiah and the nation he shepherded. So this next assessment, it is also congruent with and runs parallel to 2 Samuel 7. Because after all, it is Israel who has, but now you yourselves, you have become stagnant and rancid, foul and loathsome, for having refused to accept, and have pushed aside, even rejecting and spurning, disassociating from, by repudiating on your own initiative to get rid of, while presumptively passing over your Messiah. Oh, a dagger to the heart, to Christians, to Jews. In Mizmor Psalm 89:38, after saying everything possible that could be used to acclaim the essential nature of Dowd as the chosen one, as God's firstborn son, as the anointed Messiah, as the king and returning sovereign of the world, as our Savior, as the one who enabled the benefits of the covenant, a Zeroah, Passover lamb. After saying all of these things, that Dowd is his beloved, the person of promise, God says, in spite of everything I have told you about him, even telling you that if any aspect of this that I have said about Dowd does not pertain to Dowd, then not only am I proven a liar, but I will have failed. And now God has to tell you that you yourselves have been stagnant and rancid, foul and loathsome, because you have refused to accept and you have pushed aside your Messiah. You have rejected and spurned him. You've disassociated from him by repudiating him. Neither Christians nor Jews accept Dowd as their Messiah. And yet, he is the only one that Yahowah said you should accept as your Messiah, because Yahowah said, I myself anointed him as Messiah. It says, on your own initiative, you have presumptively passed over your Messiah. Oh my God. I mean, this obliterates Christianity, obliterates Judaism. I mean, a bar even being used here. You know what a bar is the root of? It's the actionable root of Pesach, to pass over. And it was the Messiah that fulfilled Passover in year 4000 Yan 33 CE. In the long litany of poor decisions over the millennium, this is among the most condemning. As frustrating as it had to be for God to endure the constant caustic rejection of those he was trying to save between Mitzrayim and the promised land, as appalling as it was and must have been to witness their love affair with their own words and religions, as he was speaking directly to them and then through Moshe to them. Now, this was worse. It's not just that Yahowah loves Dowd. It's that God's Son made the ultimate sacrifice for his people. He told them what he was going to do 1,000 years in advance, and yet they rejected him anyway and denied everything that he represents, including his fulfillment of Chag Matzah. And then they replaced him with a false Messiah. Now, 3,000 years later, they still haven't come to their senses. This is an exceedingly harsh and graphic rebuke, reflecting the full measure of God's animosity. He had obviously peered well into the future to see how his son would be received by his people. And he knows they would become septic, putrefying. There's an untreated wound. They had a rancid stench, and still do. They would reject their Savior, repudiating everything God had to say about him. And in the process, they would forego the covenant, passing past the Passover lamb. They would search for a Messiah and Savior while disavowing the genuine article. Sure, it's obvious Jesus wasn't a Messiah. He didn't even exist. But nor was Bar Kokhba. HaMashiach, the Messiah, is Dowd. To promote, to believe in, to worship, or to claim another by any name is to be perceived as odious by God and to be spurned by him. With only the Towrah before him, in his present funk, Dowd needed this bold assessment from God to discern what now seems so obvious to us. His father was positioning him to be the greatest among men, Elyown. And when he perceived the benefits and accepted the offer, so that we would know of it and be able to capitalize upon this gift, Dowd, or Yahowah, took Dowd forward in time as well, so that he could witness what he would achieve, and then he would write of it. The lone eyewitness accounts were all scribed in first person, and they're found in Mizmor Psalms 22 and 88. And if that were not enough, each of the first 30 songs sung by Dowd addresses this decision to serve in this manner. The crowning jewel of the 89th Mizmor, this song, Dowd's song, where all of this is made so very obvious for him and now for us, is an embarrassment to Israel and to Yehudam, God's people, because they have passed over all of these bold pronouncements. And as a result, they have rejected their Messiah. Denial of God's attestation that Dowd is the Son of God, our returning King, the Messiah, and our Savior, results in being rejected by God. Nullifying the gift of life they have been so generously offered leaves them with no excuse, no benefit whatsoever. To Christianity or Judaism, they're both counterproductive. Yahowah has affirmed this profound truth through his prophets so many times and so many ways that it is befuddling that as few as 1 in a million Yehudim acknowledge Dowd as their Messiah, or that 5 billion Goyim bequeath a Greek misappropriation of his title to a crude counterfeit. After enduring 2,000 years of harassment for failing to accept Jesus as their Lord, it turns out Jews were correct in rejecting the mythical misnomer. But now it's time to take the next step and recognize that HaMashiach is Dowd, and that it is only through him that the family can be reconciled. Now, if you're a descendant of Jacob, pause and reflect upon this. Almost everything religious and secular Jews have claimed regarding Dowd, David, the Mashiach and fulfillment of the Mow'edym, is untrue. It's all upended and incongruent. So it's long past time to consider and accept God's point of view and to embrace what Dowd represents. He is not only HaMashiach, the Messiah, but also our Savior, for having fulfilled Pesach, Passover, as the AL Lamb, opening the door to life. Do not pass over him in some ill-conceived attempt to pay homage to Judaism, cultural traditions, or mores. Now, I understand that Yehudim have been plagued over the centuries by those who have tormented them under the false belief that Jesus Christ was the Messiah. And because Christians blame Jews for killing their God, the very idea of the Messiah being the Son of God and fulfilling Passover by being crucified by Rome, well, that's a bit disorienting. I understand that. And while there's never been any objective support for the Christian myth, there has been incalculable harm perpetrated under that delusion. Well, Christ is the deadliest and most damning fraud ever perpetrated. The truth is sweet revenge. The Messiah returned. And he, as the Son of God, fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim to enable the benefits of the covenant. One does not have to change his name or append his identity to claim any of the many hundreds of prophecies which acknowledge Dowd's greatness. They're all there. They're all properly attested. I mean, second only to removing Yahweh's name 7,000 times from his testimony in the Towrah, Nabiim, Wamizbor. This error in judgment and this lapse in scholastic rigor has caused more harm to Yehudim Jews than any other. They have rejected the only soul capable of restoring their soul. And they have frustrated the only God capable of saving them. And the actual identity and purpose of Yahweh's Messiah has been acknowledged throughout this psalm and throughout the prophets, throughout the Mizmor, even in the Torah. And had Jews not committed to this crime of denying their Messiah and denying that Dowd was their Messiah and that he came exactly when he said he was going to do exactly what he said he was going to do, then he would never have been replaced by Jesus Christ, and Christianity's New Testament wouldn't have fooled anyone. There would have been no diaspora and no Holocaust. As I have shared, affirming this heartbreaking reality, the Hitpael stem modifying a bar passing over, your Messiah proves it. This uncommon designation reveals that the religious were not coerced. They rejected God on their own initiative, equally telling abar as the verbal root of Pesach equates the rejection of the Messiah with foregoing the benefits of Passover. So reminding Yisra'el of their fall as a result of the religions they begot. And as a consequence of those they beguiled. Yahowah asserts that by denying the Messiah, they were renouncing the covenant he had established by fulfilling Chag Matzah. We will conclude with this comment. Speaking to his people, or to the world at large, after underscoring everything that was important for us to know about Dowd being the Messiah and returning King, our Savior, God said, you have repudiated and renounced. You have disavowed, refusing to even acknowledge, and you actually lack respect for. You have spurned and nullified the covenant with your coworker. You have dishonored and defiled. You've treated with contempt his dedication and unique standing, even his crown, throughout the land and the earth. And they have, and they continue to. And until this is resolved, most will pay the ultimate price. This is the message we are sharing with God's people, recognizing that very few of them will heed it until their backs are against the wall and they have no one else to whom to turn. When they realize that their IDF is not saving them, when their politicians are misleading them, that the rabbis have defrauded them, and that the Marxists in their mix have no answers for them. It's only then that they will listen to what God has to say and benefit from it. But in advance of that, so that we know it, so that we can share it with them, so that we're prepared when the time comes, I am reinforcing all of this with you. And for that, I appreciate you listening. Good day.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.